Throughout the 6 years of this broadcast, we focus on a lot of bullying, but nothing can compare to what happened in Boston. In Boston, a student was stabbed during a fight in a high school bathroom. Now, this was all captured on a cell phone camera. One of the students had a knife, but the other one was in custody. I'm going to play the clip, and I should warn you, the clip you're about to hear is very disturbing. I do not, and I really do not want people, even youngsters, under 10, under 17 watching this, so take a look.
Here at police headquarters, they have been questioning students about exactly what happened at the high school today. Much of what investigators need to know was caught on camera. Parents rushed to hug their children outside Medford High School after two students got into a fight inside a second-floor boys' bathroom. Cell phone video shows one of the students appears to have a knife in his right hand as he lunges at the other student. The knife drops to the ground and another student kicks it away.
We do have one student that is in police custody.
While one student went to the police department, the other went to the hospital with a cut to his chest. School officials said they were relieved to learn he will be okay.
Yes, incredible relief. We don't want anyone coming to school getting hurt. You don't get up in the morning, leave your house, say bye to your parents, and then expect them to be notified that you're on your way to the hospital.
The school superintendent called this an isolated incident, but several students and parents say there has been an ongoing problem with bullying and violence.
I've been to every school committee meeting, every city council meeting. I've appealed to Department of Education, to DCF, that there is major safety issues happening here.
Police and school officials promised increased security when classes resume tomorrow, but they say there are no plans to add metal detectors at the school.
It's not been proven to be an effective thing to have metal detectors at doors.
The school superintendent says students who stood by, witnessed the attack, and did nothing to stop it, they could also face punishment. Live in Medford, David Beanick, WCBB News Center 5.
Okay, two things. Number one of the students helped out by kicking the knife away. But it wasn't his possession. He helped by kicking it away, so he maybe should have been punished. Number two, how can you be punished for not helping out? Like, what is there, a rule like all students gotta help out? It would have been like this. You didn't help out, detention. You, suspension. You, suspension. You, detention. You, suspension. You, detention. All suspensions, you're out of here. Detention, you stay with me. It's crazy. Not as crazy as this next story. Imagine being bullied for about a year. Then you realize it was your own mother. Your mother was the one who stalked you and told you to kill yourself. Just imagine that. Your mother, the stalker, as an undercover student, as a student undercover, as a cyber stalker, who tells you to kill yourself. Your own mother. This is one of the most sickening stories I've talked about in the 6 years. I gotta warn you, those text messages you may hear about, very disturbing. Take a look.
Girl in Michigan was cyberbullied. A high school girl in Michigan was cyberbullied for more than a year, sometimes receiving up to 12 threatening messages a day.
And who turned out to be the suspect shocked everyone. Reporter Eric Lloyd has that story.
When the case first came into our office, it was very bizarre and almost hard to believe.
What was presented to Isabella County Prosecutor David Barbary was a police report saying this woman, Kendra Licari, had catfished and harassed her daughter and her daughter's boyfriend for months.
We're talking about several hundreds of text messages. I mean, over 1,000 pages of discovery in the case.
Licari is charged with 5 crimes, mainly for stalking, as the messages went on for more than a year.
But by and large, it was mostly just harassing type text messages, demeaning, demoralizing, and kind of mean text.
According to the complaint, police say Licari used software to hide her location and used several different numbers and area codes to appear to be other Beale City students sending the messages. Then Licari herself helped her daughter report it to police.
If at any point this became something that they didn't want to engage in or continue, they could have stopped. But rather than stop, it continued to snowball into this sophisticated plan where they try to conceal their identity and throw the police off their tracks.
Barbary says they may never find the actual reason for all of this, but the impact left the two victims distressed and broken.
Someone else coined this term, it wasn't myself, but they called it a version of cyber Munchausen syndrome, in the sense that this seems to be that type of behavior where you're making somebody feel bad or need you in their life because of this behavior.
Licari is back in court for an official arraignment on December 20th.
Which is tomorrow. And we'll update you on Wednesday. Alright, just days ago, a York High School board meeting addresses a video of a student being bullied. But, I'll play it next minute. First, let me give you my take on this. Really? A mother? If my mom was acting like a student and stalking me, I would press charges immediately. I wouldn't ask you for forgiving me. It's like Clark Kent is Superman. Clark Kent's the good guy, but Superman would be the bad guy. Superman would be the bully. Clark Kent would be the good guy and a good father. But then Superman would be a bad hero and a bad person to the community. If you think you know where I'm going with this is very similar, you're right. You are absolutely right. We don't need parents acting like cyber stalkers. And I'm glad something's going to happen tomorrow. And we'll update you on Wednesday as this goes along about Kendra Licari. So, we'll update you then, and we'll be posting what's going on. Coming up next, there was a school board meeting in York that addressed a video of a student being bullied. We'll let you know what happens. Then later, the conclusion to continuing alive. Will the people that survive continue to press forward on that trip to the Andes? Or will they die? Stay with us. There was a video of a person who had disabilities who was being bullied. And now the York board meeting, the Board of Education, is now talking about this. The parents of special needs students at the high school in Elmhurst do not want police action. Students involved have been disciplined. So, what's the school board going to say? Here's Maribel Gonzalez.
Bullying or violence of any kind will not be tolerated in Elmhurst District 205.
Deeply disturbed and heartbroken is how the Elmhurst District 205 School Board describes this video taken last week, which appears to show a group of students shoving a boy with a disability inside of a school bathroom at York Community High School, all while laughing and taunting him. The board announcing Tuesday night no criminal charges will be filed in the case following an investigation by the Elmhurst Police Department. According to police, the student with special needs, including several of the teens shown in the video, are on the school's wrestling team, and they willfully engaged in the behavior seen here.
Both the parents of the student and school administration have decided that this matter would be handled through the school disciplinary process.
The school board saying the students involved will be facing significant consequences, although they wouldn't specify what that entails.
Confidentiality laws prohibit identification of the students involved and specific disciplinary actions completed.
But the response from the school falls short for some parents.
It definitely looked like hazing and a bunch of kids taking advantage of somebody who's vulnerable and doesn't understand what's going on and how he's being treated.
Now, the family of the student with special needs tells me that even though they chose not to press criminal charges, they do appreciate the school taking disciplinary action against the students involved. Reporting live outside of York Community High School, Maribel Gonzalez, CBS 2 News.
Maribel, thank you.
And I'm glad the school's taking action, and I'm not happy that they're not pressing charges. I mean, what's the one thing you have to do? I mean, if they don't want to press charges, it's their choice. But I'm glad the school is doing something to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Because if that was me, because if someone bullied me and my mom heard about this, she would automatically press charges immediately. And the school board reduced on the battle by adding extra security. But the thing we have to understand here is that I don't want this happening. All I wanted to do was to go to school, try to fit in, get an education. All I wanted to do is two things. Number one, go to school, and number two, try to get a good education. Some schools may give you the best good education, but other schools just don't give a rat's ass. No offense, but Bob Love is one of the best schools ever. And incidentally, if there's things that need to be done, there's things that need to be done. Things need to be done. Remember when we talked about zero tolerance in schools? Well, just yesterday, I recently stumbled across a video from the Young Turks that really got me on edge. This was 10 years ago. They talked about this from The Guardian. But before we play you that, let's play that. Remember the burping kid I told you about, Francisco Montano? Let's hear what the Young Turks had to say about that burping kid who was arrested.
200 kids have been arrested in Albuquerque, in the Albuquerque School District in the past 3 years, and they've been arrested for non-violent offenses, right? Mm-hmm. Minor misdemeanors, not a big deal, but they've been arrested and sent to juvenile hall. Mm-hmm. Now, it turns out that a kid was arrested for burping in class.
Oh, come on.
Literally.
Oh, this country is insane, man. Our answer to everything is put them in jail.
Yeah.
You smoke pot? Oh, that's it. Jail. Sometimes jail for life, right? Now we got a Republican candidate saying you should be executed, right? So now we're arresting kids for burping.
Yeah.
You know how many kids in my elementary school would have been arrested? Almost all the boys. Like, it was funny. Like, oh. And then what happens? Gone. In jail. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, when I was in school, the big thing was the armpit fart.
That's disgusting. You should be arrested.
Can you imagine?
No, of course, we all did that.
Go to
Except
jail
I couldn't quite do it. I was the dork who was like, well, I don't get it.
Anna, can you do it?
The noise.
I can't do it.
You can?
Yeah, I'm not going to do it now, though.
Oh, come on. Come on.
Just kidding. No, I can't. Okay, hold on. I haven't done it in a while.
Do it.
I'm very rusty. I can't
You couldn't do it. Fail. Okay, anyway, so what happened to the poor kid?
Okay, so, he got arrested and he got sent to juvenile hall because of the fact that he burped. I'm sure he's out now, but the reason why he was arrested is because the teacher was complaining that he was disrupting the class. Well, if he's disrupting the class, you find a way to punish him rather than, or talk to him. Pull him aside, talk to him, and tell him, hey, if you do this again, I'm going to send you to the principal's office. You don't send him to jail or
we had a
juvenile
thing
hall.
for that back in the day. It was called detention.
Right.
Okay? And then if that didn't work, and he was like one of those kids who spells out the alphabet while burping, okay, fine, he won't stop. Suspension, okay?
Right. That's right.
Nowhere in that chain, all the way to expulsion, is arrest them and throw them in juvenile hall.
Again, his name is Francisco Montano. He's 25 now. He was 15 back in 2012. This happened back in 2010. So I think it was 13 at the time. 2 years ago. That was 12 years ago. He had arrested for burping, but the school and the police say it was more than that. He disrupted the class. So he sent him to the detention center. Then the detention center called his mother, Annette Montano. He was never prosecuted, but he sued the school and the police. But the Albuquerque police say they only make arrests if the disruption is so bad. meaning the teacher can't teach and students can't learn. And America's Most Wanted, like we talked about in Classroom Confidential, we've gone over the line. Instead of teaching and nurturing, we're hauling them off in handcuffs. In the near future, I'm going to play you with a 10-year-old who's autistic and was arrested. 10 years old. Give me a break. Coming up. Texas schools have police arresting kids. They have no police department. I'm going to read you an article from The Guardian. Then the men from Alive, will they go to Chile or will they die? Stay with us. Every time you walk into school, you see a police officer. According to The Guardian from 10 years ago, more and more U.S. schools have police patrolling the corridors. Pupils are being arrested for throwing paper airplanes and failing to pick up crumbs from the canteen floor. Why is the state criminalizing normal childhood behavior? It's a school-to-prison pipeline like we talked about. I mean, look at the cases from Classroom Confidential. One was arrested for burping. The other was arrested for throwing a tantrum. The little girl that was in Tampa, Florida in 2005. She was handcuffed for throwing a tantrum. And years ago from New York, a girl, Alexa, was 12 years old when she was arrested. Searched, handcuffed, taken away by 4 of New York's finest for doodling on the desk. Now in that case, that was vandalism. And in vandalism cases, the school can decide to press charges. Each day, hundreds of school children appear before courts in Texas charged with offenses such as swearing, misbehaving on the school bus, or getting into a punch-up in a playground. Children have been arrested for possession of cigarettes, wearing inappropriate clothes, and being late for school. Okay? 12 years ago, the police gave close to a $300,000 Class C misdemeanor tickets to children as young as 6 years old in Texas for offenses in and out of school, which result in fines. Community service and even prison time. What was once handled with telling off by the teacher or called to parents can now result in arrest and a record that may cost a young person a place in college or job years later. But years ago, the Texas State Legislature changed the law to stop issuing the tickets to 10 and 11-year-olds over classroom behavior. And the state age of criminal responsibility is 10. But a border bill to end the practice entirely, championed by the state senator John Wetmeyer, who called the system ridiculous and failed to pass and cannot be considered again for another 2 years. The federal government has weighed in, with the U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder saying the criminal citations being used to maintain discipline in schools, that is something that really has to stop. There was a 200-page study talking about this from the justicecenter.org, which talk about arresting juveniles. Fines go up to $500. But now let's see what the Young Turks have to say.
Vince of The Guardian is the best publication in the world. But anyway, recently they talked about the school-to-prison pipeline, which is something that we've discussed before, but they did a really great detailed report on the number of school-age students who are getting arrested in Texas. And they're getting arrested for crazy things, including spraying perfume on themselves in class.
How dare they?
How dare they?
Maximum security.
Now, this is something that I'm fascinated by, right? Because whenever you see kids being arrested and given classy misdemeanors, someone's profiting from it, right? So at first I thought it has to be the for-profit prisons. It has to be. But when it comes to juvenile detention centers in the state of Texas, there's only one private juvenile detention center that only houses about 145 kids. Mm-hmm. So it's not the for-profit prisons in this case. But here's what it is. It's the regressive system of revenue generation. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what's happening is they need to generate revenue, right? Texas is always talking about how they have low taxes and it's great because, you know, people have financial freedom there. No, they don't have financial freedom. They're finding kids to give classy misdemeanors to, so they pay the fine and the state generates as much revenue as possible from that.
If this applied back when I was going to school, I would have been arrested every other day. I mean, people getting arrested for leaving class? You're kidding me?
You get arrested for being absent. You get arrested for spraying perfume on yourself. You get arrested for cussing at other students. If you don't get arrested and if you don't get sent to a juvenile detention center, you most certainly get a fine, right? And you have to pay that fine. You have to show up to court. So let me give you some more details on this story that I found fascinating in the article. In 2010, the police gave 300,000 Class C misdemeanors to children as young as 6 in the state of Texas. All right. The number of school districts with their own police departments rose 20% in the last 2 decades. Think about that. All of these school districts have their own mini police departments that focus on giving these students tickets so they can pay these fines.
By the way, some cities in Texas have actually shut their police departments down completely. But they do have police departments inside the schools. Why? Because the 6-year-olds are about to riot? No, because they make money off of it. They figured out a money-making system, but they're not raising taxes because the politicians have to say they're not raising taxes. So what do? There's an old Mitt Romney trick in Massachusetts. Everybody now, almost all the Republican governors do it. I'm sure Democrats do it too, but the Republicans came up with it so they can say they don't raise taxes. Oh, I just increased fines. What? So, if you're got parking violations, increase the fines. Moving violations, increase the fines. School violations, well now, no, they're misdemeanors now. They're not just, you don't just get suspended, you owe me money.
Yes.
In fact, I make so much money off of this, I hired a policeman inside your school just so he can write out these tickets so we can criminalize your 6-year-olds and get paid for doing it.
Look, it's a win-win for both teachers, school administrators, and also for the state, because the state is making money, and then the teachers and the administrators can just have a knee-jerk reaction to everything, not have to go through the process of disciplining these students, just be like, hey, let's call the police. This little girl sprayed perfume on herself. Let's get rid of her.
And one other terrible part of this is that it makes our kids into robots. Don't question authority. Don't do anything wrong. You do something even slightly out of step with what a teacher wants. That's it. You're committing a misdemeanor. You'll be fined. And especially for the poor and middle-class kids, those fines can be devastating.
Let me tell you guys how. Students who have been arrested while they were in school do not have the opportunity to get federal financial aid when they apply for college. So it really screws them over. And here's another way that it screws these kids over. What happens is, let's say it is a poor family and they do not have the money necessary to pay this fine. What happens is they put the fine on hold until the student is 17 years old. And then when the student is 17, they throw them in jail.
Oh, for Christ's sake, man. Just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, right? So what are we doing, man? We're locking up half the country.
Agreed. I can't pay this. Okay, well, until he's 17. They'll throw him in jail. That's cool. It ain't cool. I mean, we have our own police right here in Flower Bluff, but they're not giving out freaking tickets for burping, spraying perfume on themselves. You spray perfume. Put your hands behind your back. I'm taking you to jail. Arrested for spraying perfume. I'd imagine being arrested for causing a plane crash and for not helping out. Coming up, will the boys survive the trip to Argentina after that horrible plane crash? Or, if they fail, will they fail and die? Keith Morrison continues their survivor story. Stay with us. Saturday, I brought you the story about a group of survivors who were on an airplane on the way to Chile for a rugby tournament. Little did they realize they had to cross the Andes. The Andes Mountains, which was a volcano, which is where the plane crashed. But the 48 survivors, few people have survived, others died. But now, the question is, will they get to Chile, or will they just give up? Here's Keith Morrison with more.
We asking God not to make it easy, but to make it possible.
Their 60th day on the mountain breaks brilliantly clear. Today is the day. And as if to emphasize how dire their situation has become, another teammate has died during the night. Canessa and Parado carry with them a makeshift sleeping bag, 2 rugby socks filled with body parts, and the last hope of survival for the 14 left behind. But where are they? They think the valleys of Chile lay behind this mountain west of the fuselage, but in reality, They're far to the east, across an entire mountain range here on the border of Chile and Argentina.
All distances in the mountains are much bigger than they look.
They learn this the hard way. It takes them 2 days, their fingers frozen, bleeding, their bodies aching and bruised, to climb the 13,500-foot mountain. They reach the summit and want to weep.
I can recall that I was dead. What we saw from the top of the mountains was impossible. Only peaks and peaks and peaks and peaks to the horizon, 360 degrees around.
Parrado and Canessa are stunned. All seems lost. But Parrado's single-minded determination prevails.
We decided the way we were going to die. We decided that we were going to die crashing against those mountains, trying to go to the west.
And so they stagger on, gasping for breath, taking ridiculous chances.
12, 14 hours non-stop climbing, falling, racing.
Had they known how impossible their journey would be, Canessa and Parrado might rather have stayed with the airplane. Out here in howling winds on precipitous slopes, nighttime temperatures dropped to 30 degrees below zero. A desperately sick Canessa begged to stop, knowing that he would die. But Parrado cursed at him and implored, and he got up and they stumbled on again. Over seemingly endless days, followed by frigid nights, they struggle west, compelled by their will to live, and fears for their friends starving to death above them. But they are weary to the bone.
We lost a lot of weight, so it's not exhaustion, it's that we're dying.
What a time to die. Back at the mountaintop, the sun of the day warms the boys, but is spoiling what remains of their food. And the Christmas carols, blaring from the radio, torture Coche. The psychic pain of facing Christmas as a cannibal hastens his fast to the death.
The 24th of December, Christmas Eve, was the limit. If they didn't come before that day, I was going to die.
Really? Wanted to die?
It was easier to die than continue eating.
On December 21st, as Coche is preparing to die, Canessa and Parrado are dead men walking. Canessa begging to stop, Parrado pushing stoically forward. They cross a ridge and see there before them the green valleys of Chile.
There was a line where the snow finished, and when I stood on the other side, I said, I am not going to die.
9 days of hiking have brought them into an alpine Eden. Yet still there is no sign of human life. Faint from exhaustion, they're struggling over the rocks beside a river. Canessa stops and stares across into the distance.
We saw a man on a horse crossing and saying, no, let's run down there. There's a shepherd. So we begin to scream and to ask for help.
They were desperately running and screaming and fell to their knees, begging for help. I couldn't do anything with that river between us and signaled that I'd return the next morning with help.
I was completely exhausted. This was the most happy moment in my life, but I just couldn't move a finger. I was completely finished.
The shepherd returns the next morning. He throws a rock with paper and a pen attached across to the boys. Parrado writes this note and heaves it back across the river. I come from a plane that fell in the mountains. I am Uruguayan. I have 14 injured friends up there. Please help. We're hungry. The shepherd motions them downstream where a bridge arcs the river.
I went on his horse, and then he brought us to a little place, and he set the table for us and put some beans, stew.
The ravenous boys devour what little food their rescuers carry.
He had cheese with the milk, goat cheese. I mean, this was, never have eaten something so great in my life.
As one of the horsemen rode away to get help, Canessa and Parrado ate cheese and milk and bread for the first time in 70 days. And they thought about their friends still up there on the mountain. And about the evidence there of the terrible story they were going to have to tell the world.
And in that moment, I remember that we had eaten human flesh, and I thought, how can we have done that? Such a horrible and repugnant thing, and then you kind of switch back into your life. It's human behavior. There are lots of things unconscious that we cannot handle.
They are back in civilization and overcome by what feels like shame. They discreetly bury the last remains of the friends who have sustained them for 70 days. In the late afternoon, a troop of mounted Chilean police arrive. Parado tries to make them understand they need helicopters, not horses. The order goes to headquarters in the capital, Santiago, and from there the unbelievable news is flashed to the world. And back up on the mountain, the starving boys are riveted to the little transistor radio.
When we hear the radio, they notice that two people that says they say are called Canessa and Parado. We say, okay, we know that, yeah, that's true. So we are saved. I think the most emotional moment in our lives. No?
Heavy fog on the morning of December 22nd delays the arrival of the rescue helicopters, but not the world press.
This is the NBC Saturday Night News.
Tonight, we have film of what very nearly amounts to a real miracle.
It wasn't an adventure. It was, or you walk or you die.
Canessa and Parado tell their story. They're evasive about just what they have eaten. At noon, helicopters finally reach the mountain meadow. After doctors examine the boys, Parado boards a helicopter and guides the rescuers through the mountain labyrinth. The military helicopters were never intended to fly at these altitudes. Updrafts threatened to smash them against the cliffs. Then, clearing the summit, the choppers swooped down the glacier. And there in the snow, 14 screaming, waving, celebrating survivors. And Coche will not die on the mountain after all.
It was the most emotional day ever. It was like I had been born again, and I owed it all to them, to my dead friends, but especially to Parado and Canessa. I owed them my life.
As the helicopters hover near the wreck, the pilots stare at a scene of carnage they can barely comprehend. Scattered in the snow around the airplane are body parts, undeniable evidence of sustained cannibalism. The rescuers are shocked by what they see. But running low on fuel, they pull the boys aboard and concentrate on the dangerous flight back. The survivors frantically feast, even as doctors and nurses swarm about them. Parado, still the strongest, helps distribute coffee, chocolate, and cheese. They're in shock. They have survived. Overwhelmed by that reality, some weep. Coche is so weak he can barely sit up. The Chilean pilots say not a word about what they have seen on the mountaintop. Most of the survivors are in desperate need of medical care. Parado has lost 50 pounds. Canessa, 45. Coche, an incredible 80, half his body weight. They all suffer from frostbite, skin infection, vitamin deficiencies. By the time the boys arrived here at the Hospital of St. John of God in the town of San Fernando, word of their astonishing survival had been flashed around the world. An army of media was gathering outside the building. This miracle, they thought, must have some explanation. Inside a private room, a young priest named Andres Rojas had been summoned to see Nando Parado. "Father," said Nando, "I have something to confess."
I told him it would have been wrong to let yourself be beaten and just die.
The priest assures them, what they have done is not a sin. There is nothing to confess. As the rest of the world marvels at the miracle of the Andes, only the priest, their families, and Chilean officials know the truth. "How did you survive?" asks the press. "On chocolate bars," says Canessa, "and some light food we found." On Christmas, there's a joyful mass with families and rescuers, and a huge dinner for the boys who are now being called heroes of the Andes. But the next day, an awful image appears in a Chilean newspaper. This photograph of the wreckage. In the snow, 2 partially eaten bodies. And around the world, millions who were amazed are now shocked. The press swarms the boys in Chile. They're advised to say nothing. So they fly home to Montevideo, where to the boys' astonishment, thousands of cheering Uruguayans welcome them back to the airport they had left 10 weeks earlier. And now they call the most extraordinary press conference. One of the boys is chosen to speak for all. He tells solemnly about the horrible choice they were forced to make on the mountain. At the end of the press conference, there is a standing ovation. and not a single question from the journalists. And so they carried their shared secrets with them as they tried to resume normal lives. But could they live with what they had done?
Coming up, the conclusion of the story, a trip back to the mountain. When we come back, the conclusion of the story, a trip back to the mountain, and what happens next for these survivors. Stay with us. The press was here. The secret was out. The photos were taken. Now, the return to the mountain. How will they feel about returning to that awful place where the plane crashed and the cannibalism just happened? Once again, here's Keith Morrison with a conclusion to our story.
A quarter century is not even an instant to the ageless Andes. Yet that is how long this mountain has kept its dead. The remains of the crash victims were buried up here by the Chilean military not long after the rescue. Buried in a lonely, unvisited place. And almost as timeless is Montevideo. The community that nurtured the survivors re-embraced them on their return. Even the families of those who never returned.
Did you worry what the world would think? Were you worried about it?
My only worry was that our family is going to be in great joy, and the families of our friends that died are going to be in great tragedy.
Canessa and the others saw to it that the families of their dead friends knew the truth. They went to each family in turn, telling them what had happened.
I don't even expect them to understand me. I only expect them to know the truth.
The headlines that, in the language of headlines, shocked the world, followed them home. But the details of how they'd survived emerged slowly. First in a worldwide best-selling book, Alive, and later in a movie of the same name. To this day, thousands of letters, many from school children, arrive from around the world. The survivors, the boys of the Andes, are middle-aged men now. Some have children the same age they were at the time of the crash. Canessa is a prominent pediatric cardiologist. In 1994, he ran for the presidency of Uruguay, unsuccessfully. Parado owns a chain of hardware stores and hosts a sports adventure TV program. The other survivors adjusted equally well. Architects, engineers, businessmen. And to this day, every single one lives in the old neighborhood. No one has moved away.
Has any of you ever had a moment's discomfort about it?
No, never. Absolutely never. The only thing to do was, if you wanted to live, was to eat human flesh, and that's what we did. Very simple. And 25 years later, what's the difference between that and having a heart transplant, or a kidney transplant, or a skin transplant, or a eye transplant? It's the same, exactly the same for us.
But to their astonishment, they discover the mountain still has the power to draw them back. It is 25 years since they left the place they can't forget. And accompanied by Chilean TV, they've decided to confront the ghosts of their past. On horses and mules, the survivors and families retrace the route of Canessa and Parado. And when the horses can go no further, they scramble up the mountain on foot. Until now, the other survivors never knew what Canessa and Parado endured on their 10-day journey off the mountain.
It was monstrous what they did. I had respect for them before, but it was unbelievable when I finally saw what they did.
At their base camp, they celebrate Mass with Andres Rojas, the priest who consoled them 25 years earlier. The survivors are joined by their wives and children. They had been 16. They are now 60. Also here are some of the relatives of those who died in the mountain. And as they continue their pilgrimage, even the stoic Parado is impressed.
When you went back, how was that for you personally?
25 years later, for the first time, I realized what we had done. It just shocked me a lot when we climbed to the top of the mountain and I saw what we had done. It was like a mule hitting me in the chest, you know?
In the mountains, there weren't any buttons to push. The only button to push was yourself and your soul and your strength and everything you had. There's a different philosophy in men up there.
That's a fact.
On the final day, a few of them board high-altitude helicopters and hold onto their nerves as the rotors beat at thin air and deliver them to the place they dared not visit even in dreams. It looks the same, but the remains of the fuselage that had been their home lie buried deep beneath the snow.
When they ask us if we have nightmares and everything, I think that the worst nightmare was to be up there, that if you go through that, you can endure. The only treasure was to be alive.
High in the Andes, grown men wept and remembered. They embraced the children of the dead and consecrated the grave of their friends whom the mountain claimed still.
Nobody can imagine what we did and what we went through. But maybe we were able to do it because God gave us that chance. That's life, that's instinct, that's survival.
Wow. I'm gonna have a final thought about this in just a moment. Stay with us. After doing this show for 6 years, I never came across stories of survival, just like these guys here, like the bear story, and this story, and this story up here, and this story that I've showed you. I mean, I've watched this alive story several times. I just couldn't believe it. Eating the flesh of a human, that's cannibalism right there. But I'm glad these survivors told their stories, and it took me just 2 days to finish this up. It just could have been another hour, and I wouldn't even talk about this. But I'm glad the survivors doing well and doing great as always. And we live in the nightmare of that plane crash, eating people. I think it was some movie. The bottom line is just this. Don't eat people. Find ways to survive. If you gotta eat snow to survive. Melt it into water. Do what you have to. But just remember this. Remember this old phrase. Survival of the fittest. Till next time, take care of yourself and each other. Here's a preview I have for you coming up on Wednesday.
This man admitted he'd been involved in the girl's abduction and had held her while he said this man molested her. Neither was arrested. Both are walking the streets.
Kermit? Hi, how are you? I'm Morley Safer from CBS. Did you ever molest children?
No. Yes, I did too. I got picked up in Nebraska. I had a kid back there. He was 16 years old.
You were picked up by police in Nebraska?
I went to jail for a year. We got to do this on the street, Keith.
That's on Wednesday. That's Give Me a Break for this Monday. We'll see you again for Give Me a Break Wednesday. If there's any more developments in that Kendra case, we'll let you know tomorrow. On Give Me a Break right now. GMB right now. For all of us here at YouTube and Give Me a Break, hope you've had a great day. Good night, everyone.